Welcome to my repair your cracked bumper for around $100 video. Now the weather wasn't very good when I was doing this, so I put the car in the garage. I'm cutting off the wires that were holding the bumper together that the previous owner installed to hold it together. Now this car is a 2003 Mitsubishi Eclipse GT Spider convertible. My daughter asked me to repair this cracked bumper for her birthday, so it's a labor of love. I'm using some wax and grease remover to clean off any wax and grease on the bumper. Just wipe it on. Now I'm using a 100 grit to sand inside just on the crack to clean it off, make a nice mechanical physical bond for the glue to adhere to. I'm using 400 grit to just sand out on the outside of the bumper itself, not on the crack. And I'm using some files just to file out those drill holes the previous owner put in for the wire, just to clean those out nice. And I'm just using a brush to brush off any dust inside the crack before I apply the glue. There's a JB Weld plastic bonder and a super glue. After doing this, I wouldn't recommend the super glue. It didn't really help. So I'm applying the JB plastic bonder right here, just on the crack itself. Just using a paintbrush to get it on there. I don't want to apply too much. So since this is a curved crack, it was hard to put it together. I'm using a floor jack to hold it up and together after I get the glue on. I have my daughter here helping me put the jack up while I hold it in position. Now I'm using some super glue here. The idea was it'll help it hold together so I can continue on and try to glue the rest of the crack. But it didn't work out. I had to glue this crack in 2 days. So I went halfway, let it cure overnight, and I came back and glued the rest of it on the second day. Now these are some woodworking clamps I'm using to hold it together along with the floor jack. Getting real creative on this fix. Now this is hard to line up, so trying to get everything lined up, use the floor jack to hold it together and make sure everything is lined up the way it needs to be, just as close to perfect as you can get it. And I'm just sitting there feeling to make sure that the bumper lines up along the crack line. So I've applied more clamps. I got the floor jack. I got a broom handle and I put a weight behind it to apply some pressure in a spot to get it really lined up here. So I'm just applying that next clamp and really feeling with my finger that everything has lined up together. Okay, after I got lined up, I'm just removing the clamps the next day. Sanding with some 320 grit. I switched to some 80 grit because the glue was just so hard. I needed to just knock the bumps of the glue down. Just keep filling the bumps of the glue as I'm sanding it. Make sure they're getting flat. Just using a paintbrush, brushing all the dust off. Then I switched to the regular original JB Weld right here because it's a stronger glue, but it's not as flexible as the plastic bonder. And I'm using a Bondo spreader from the Automotive paint supply to really make sure that glue is as smooth as possible, because would be extremely hard to sand if you got it on too thick. So really smooth it out, really nice and smooth. So I go over it, wipe the spreader off, get all the glue off, and then try to smooth it on again. So I'm wiping it off with a paper towel. And just putting that glue along that crack line. Trying to fill any gaps with this glue. Now really smooth it out and try to get it as flat as possible. Now we're just taping everything up before we start painting. Using a 400 grit here for a final sanding. And wiping it off with a shop paper towel, all the dust off. I wanted to move that tape line up from where it was. Because as we spray the paint on, I'm actually not going to spray along that tape line. I'm going to spray below it. Using some wax and grease remover again. This will also remove some of the paint dust and any wax or grease is still on there. Shouldn't be any on there now. Using a tack cloth, get any dust particles off there or paper particles off this where we're going to spray paint this bumper. Now this paint is a single stage acrylic urethane enamel that I had mixed up at the professional auto body supply that I showed at the first of the video. And the cost of this was $23.93 mixed up in a paint can for me. You just take your paint code into the automotive supply and they'll mix up to match your exact paint on your car. Now this is a 3M disposable respirator. You cannot replace the filters on this filter I used. So this is an organic vapor spray paint applications P95 dual cartridge respirator. I'll provide a link to everything used in this video in the description below. Make sure you really mix up this paint very good by shaking it vigorously. Just testing it on a piece of cardboard to make sure the color was right before I sprayed it on the bumper, which it was. You can see it looks, the paint color is a exact match. So the idea here is just spray a very light coat on, extremely light. You're not trying to get any paint runs. You let the paint sit for 5 minutes to tack up, kind of dry out a little bit, and then you apply another very light coat. I put 6 coats on this bumper. Just waited 5 minutes in between each coat. Just very light coats each time. Shake the can before each coat. So this is spraying wet on wet. You don't sand in between coats. And after the 6th coat, I let it dry and I peeled all my plastic bags off. Removed all the tape. And the bumper looks pretty good here. We're all finished. So this is a pretty cheap, hard to do repair, but accomplished for around $100 without having to take it to a shop and have a whole new front bumper put on and painted, and they'd probably charge you around $1,500 to do it that way.